The Russian military has assembled a force of 50,000 soldiers, which includes North Korean troops. They are preparing to begin an assault, aiming to reclaim territory seized by Ukraine in the Kursk region of Russia. A new American assessment concludes that Russia has amassed this force without having to pull out its soldiers from the east of Ukraine. The east is currently Russia's main battlefield priority. It allows Moscow to press on multiple fronts simultaneously. Russian troops have been clawing back some of the territory that Ukraine captured in Kursk earlier this year. They've been attacking Ukrainian positions with missile strikes and artillery fire, but they are yet to begin a major assault there. Ukrainian officials say they expect such an attack involving North Korean troops in the coming few days. For now, the North Koreans are training with Russian forces in the far western part of Kursk. On Crux Decode, what may the induction of North Korean troops into the Ukrainian battlefields mean for the future trajectory of this war? What is the deal between Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin, which has made Kim commit to this substantial troop contribution? And most importantly, can Russia successfully outsource part of its war effort in Ukraine to North Korea, much like what it has done with private militia groups like the Wagner group in the past? The Russia-North Korea offensive looms even as US President-elect Donald Trump prepares to re-enter office with a stated goal of ending the Ukraine war quickly. Trump, though, has offered very little details about how he would settle this conflict, but his Vice President-elect J.D. Vance has outlined a plan that would basically allow Russia to keep the territory it has right now in Ukraine. Right now, that is about 20% of Ukrainian territory. Some US military officials have grown even more pessimistic about Ukraine's overall prospects, noting that Russia has been steadily gaining ground both in Kursk as well as in eastern Ukraine. Officials say that the setbacks are partly a result of Ukraine's failure to address a critical shortfall in its troop strength. This is in sharp contrast to the outgoing US President Joe Biden, who's been deeply supportive of Ukraine. He's pushed Congress to approve billions of dollars in aid and having US military provide critical intelligence to Kiev to help fight the war. Ukraine's surprise incursion into Kursk in August thinned out its forces across the battlefield in the east, leaving them vulnerable to Russian advances. Western as well as Ukrainian officials say that the arrival of North Korean forces is a major escalation point after almost 2 years of this war. North Korea has sent more than 10,000 troops who will be fighting side by side with Russia in Kursk. The troops are wearing Russian uniforms, they've been equipped by Moscow, but they will probably be fighting in their own units. Moscow had supplied the North Korean forces with machine guns, sniper rifles, anti-tank missiles, and rocket-propelled grenades. Russia has been training the North Koreans in artillery fire, basic infantry tactics, and critically, trench clearing. Now that training suggests that at least some of the North Korean forces will be involved in the frontal assaults on Ukraine's defensive positions. North Korea has a large army, but unlike Russia, it's not been involved in ground combat for decades now. The troops that North Korea is deploying are considered to be its best. They have been drawn from the 11th Corps, which is home to the country's special operations soldiers. Russia is struggling to meet its monthly recruitment goal of roughly 25,000 troops, even as its casualties mount, and that is where the North Korean soldiers are critical. During his 2024 election campaign, Donald Trump described America's alliance with South Korea as terrible for his country, accusing Seoul of not paying enough money for the stationing of about 28,000 odd American troops. But when he mentioned Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea, he spoke as if Kim were a long-lost friend. Trump and Kim have had a bromance during Trump's first term as president, including the very first ever in-person meeting between the leaders of the United States and North Korea. But that bromance was short-lived. It did not lead to the widely expected deal to end the Korean War, which, of course, finished inconclusively in an armistice in 1953, but to this day has not officially ended. South Koreans are bracing themselves for Trump's return to the White House. There is growing uncertainty and anxiety. It raises the specter of yet another diplomatic rollercoaster ride on the Korean peninsula. Some fear that Trump will once again threaten to withdraw American troops from South Korea unless South Korea substantially increases the cost that it's willing to pay. They also fear that Trump will rekindle an ill-calculated diplomatic bromance with Kim Jong-un. North Korea so far has not reacted to Trump's election, but many analysts say that Kim Jong-un could see this as an opportunity to restart negotiations with the United States. This time, Kim has more bargaining power than when he first met Trump. Between then and now, North Korea's nuclear capabilities have expanded significantly. It allows Kim Jong-un to demand a much higher price tag for making concessions in its nuclear program. Since 2019, Kim Jong-un has developed and tested more nuclear-capable missiles. He has signed a mutual defense treaty with Russia back in June. In September, North Korea for the very first time unveiled a weapons-grade uranium manufacturing site, and at the inauguration of that site, Kim Jong-un had vowed to produce exponentially more nuclear weapons. Kim may even conduct his country's 7th nuclear test, which would be the first one since 2017, to try and further elevate his leverage before negotiations with Trump. If and when that happens, Trump will confront a decades-old problem which successive American governments have tried to, but have failed to solve. The last time Trump did, he veered between applying pressure, unleashing public insults against Kim, and then of course to a more friendly-toned one-on-one diplomacy, a kind of bromance, but there too, Trump failed. If Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump were to restart talks, then Kim would be widely expected to try and persuade Trump to ease the sanctions first and also to reduce America's military footprint in the Korean peninsula. In return, Kim could agree to freezing North Korea's long-range ballistic missile program. But he would ensure that North Korea is not forced to eliminate its nuclear arsenal entirely, if for nothing else, but at least for it to be used as leverage. For decades, Washington and its allies have pushed for a complete, verifiable, and irreversible dismantlement of North Korea's nuclear program. Kim Jong-un, on the other hand, wants the United States to accept his nuclear weapons as fait accompli. He wants America and North Korea to engage in talks only about reduction of arms and not about procurement of nuclear weapons in the first place. If such negotiations happen, it will cause shock and confusion in South Korea because it would tantamount to recognizing North Korea as a nuclear weapons power. And that is something which has been seen as a nightmare scenario for South Korea for the better part of the last 50 years, because once the North acquires a nuclear weapon and tacitly the United States and other Western powers acknowledge the nuclear status of North Korea, then that means that there is perhaps an irreversible differential in the power axis between the South and the North. They're waiting with anxious breath, both in Seoul and Pyongyang, to find out.